G'day, Daniel here from Living Entertainment North Coast, and today I want to talk to you about a little set of speakers, a little set of desktop speakers specifically, the Ruark MR1 MKII. So before I get into the speakers themselves, it's probably worth mentioning just a little bit about Ruark Audio themselves. So Ruark Audio is a British company, and they're best known for their series of DAB smart radios and for their compact music systems. Now, one of the very cool things about Ruark is that all of their products have a very similar aesthetic. Visually, you can pick a Ruark Audio product from a mile away. And I think it's really cool that that carries across not just their radios, but then also into their compact music systems. And then, of course, into what we're talking about today, which is their one and only stereo system. So one of the things I really love about these speakers is just how simple they are. They're very small, they're very compact, and that kind of carries across to their inputs. So on the back, you will find an input for an optical cable. So if you want to attach these to, say, a television to use instead of a soundbar, you can absolutely do that. And they also have a 3.5mm auxiliary input. So if you're looking to plug in a turntable that either has an external phono stage or an internal one, you can absolutely do that with these speakers. But I think the way most people will be using them is via Bluetooth. And in this particular case, these speakers support aptics. So there is one other little output on the back, and that is actually a subwoofer out, which is a very nifty little feature, which I suppose if you're using it as a soundbar replacement would come in pretty handy. Now, if you are using that Bluetooth input or the optical one, you're going to be interfacing directly with the speaker's internal DAC. And in this case, it's a Cirrus 24-bit stereo DAC. Now, like so many other small speakers of this type, this is a master and a slave setup. So the master speaker has a class AB amplifier, and it puts out nominal output of roughly 20 watts. And the slave speaker is actually attached via another 3.5 to 3.5 auxiliary cord. And the one that comes with these speakers is about 2 meters long. So you do have a fair bit of flexibility in terms of speaker placement in that regard. And on the topic of speaker placement, one of the very, very coolest features of these little desktop speakers is the fact that they are bottom ported. So the base port is on the bottom of the speaker. What that means is you can get them nice and close to the wall, and you're not going to be getting any chuffing or bass resonances, which is really awesome because a lot of the desktop speakers that I've used in the past actually had a rear port, and it did affect the sound quality having them as close to the wall as I often would have to with my desk placement. So that's a really, really cool feature. Now, both of these speakers have a 75mm long throw woofer, and they also have a 20mm treated textile tweeter, and these are both powered by neodymium magnet systems. Now, when we're talking fit and finish, the speakers that I have on hand behind me for review here, they have the walnut veneer finish, and I think it looks super classy. But if walnut's not your thing, you can also get these speakers in a soft grey. And speaking of grey, both models come with a lovely lead grey grille with a neat and tidy little Ruark Audio badge right on the front there, which, I don't know, I think it looks pretty classy there, to be honest. And I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the dial on the top. This little dial here is both your controller for your inputs as well as for your volume. So to turn the volume, you obviously just rotate the dial left or right. It's very, very simple and intuitive. And sitting on the desk, it's not, like it's that much effort to just reach out and give it a little bit of tweak. It's actually kind of satisfying. To change the inputs, however, that exact same dial, you just push in on, and every time you do it, the LED will change color to represent the source input. So I mostly tested these speakers via optical cable, but I did also spend quite a lot of time using the Bluetooth side of the device, and I didn't have a single dropout in my entire testing period. And if you're curious about the knob feel, yes, it is clicky and it is satisfying. But how would I describe the sound? That's what's really important here. And for me personally, I think the word that came to mind first was plucky. And I don't mean that in like a aggressive or off-putting way, but plucky in that these speakers are tiny and I didn't know what to expect, and I got a lot more out of them than I was expected looking at them. They got a real go get it attitude. The sound itself is very clean. It's not analytical, but there is a great amount of detail there, and there is a surprisingly large amount of separation between the instruments, given that, again, usually you'd be only sitting 3 feet away from these. Something that did affect my personal listening experience was my choice to have the speakers sitting on a pair of isoacoustic speaker stands. Now, that's because I also was using these speakers for doing video editing work, which is something I'll get back to later. But what I will say is this does have an impact on the amount of bass that you get out of these speakers. These speakers are definitely designed to be placed flat on the table, and that bottom ported bass port definitely suffers when it's lifted up off the table on something like a pair of isoacoustic stands. Now, if I was just listening to music, there is no way I would put them on those stands, but on the stands, it did open up a lot more detail and accuracy as far as my video editing work went when doing sound mixing. So there's a bit of a trade-off there, which I'll probably get into a little bit more elaboration on later on. But rest assured, despite their tiny size, they do have a healthy little dollop of punchy bass, and it is surprising. But again, in order to really get the benefits of that, the speakers do need to be sitting flat on a surface. Now, when it comes to that clarity and that detail, there are a few specific examples that really stood out to me during my week spent using these particular speakers. Now, I found one of the better examples of the imaging in Soundstage to be Depeche Mode's Behind the Wheel from their album Music for the Masses. There is a wonderful sequence throughout that track where the keys are just kind of like dancing around all over the place. And you do really get that sense, again, despite being so close to the speakers, that you can hear in the sound mix them hopping around in front of you. And each key has its own specific location. It's not like a vague approximation of where a key might be. You can really pinpoint the exact position where each of those keys are in the track. And I think that's really, really awesome. And it's a sort of effect that you don't hear in music that much anymore, at least not outside of like the electronic space. And I always get excited when I can pull that out of a track. So I found, I think my favorite instrument through these speakers is actually the acoustic guitar. And there were a couple of different tracks where that's really stood out to me and like really surprised me. Number one was Dancing by Chris Isaak from the Bajar sessions. There are beautiful acoustic guitars throughout this track, and the decay on them was just beautiful. Like, it really, really was very, very easy to notice. And like for 1 or 2 seconds after a string was plucked, you can hear that slowly trail off. And that's something that, even listening to it on my high-end system here, because of the nature of my room, it's not something I can appreciate. So I was genuinely surprised when I'm sitting at my desk and it just popped right out at me. It's so in my face. I love that sort of thing. And likewise, the resonance in the strings in Deftones' Change in the House of Flies from their the acoustic cut from their Rarities and B-Sides album, that resonance was really, really drawn out, and you could really hear the vibrations of the strings themselves in the recording, which again isn't something I've noticed necessarily that much before. I think, like, I've always known it's there, but again, these speakers really pulled that out in a way that I found interesting and exciting. Something else that surprised me, again, given their small size, was how well composed they were, even when you were throwing something pretty loud, pretty aggressive, pretty complicated at it. So Nine Inch Nails version 1 mix of David Bowie's I'm Afraid of Americans was a great example of that. Like, there is a lot going on in that track. It's not necessarily a super dynamic track. Everything's pretty full up, pretty loud in the track. And even in its busier moments, the MR1 MKIIs still managed to keep that positioning and that composure the whole time. There was no point where you could tell that they were struggling to present what was coming through. And that's something that I can't say for all small speakers. And yeah, I was really, really impressed by that. So I guess all in all, I describe these speakers as being articulate and punchy. They got just the right amount of dynamics for something of their size. And yeah, sometimes they are a smidge on the brighter side of things, but I don't think at any point, and this is as someone who's very susceptible to bright sounding audio gear, I never found it to be off-putting or distracting. It was just, I don't know, it was there in a way that kind of like highlighted those little intricacies and those details that I wouldn't necessarily normally pick up on, because most of the time I'm spending my time listening to warmer sort of systems. So it was nice spending some time with something a little bit more, I guess, transparent in its presentation. And I think that fact ties directly into who these speakers are for and who I would recommend them to. First and foremost, like I said, these are desktop speakers, so let's talk about that desktop usage. And in that case, there are two kind of scenarios where I'd recommend it. First of all is just, if you're just looking for something that you can just set up with your laptop or your desktop computer and just set and forget and have it sound great and not have to worry about it, these are a great option. Like I said, I've watched a lot of videos with these. I did some gaming with these, which they're actually really good for as well, especially once you lift them up and you don't have that bass there. If you're playing competitive shooters, that'll give you an edge because those footsteps, very, very, very well imaged and very easy to hear. And again, music, obviously, they just sound good. They just sound engaging and exciting. It doesn't matter if you're sitting in front of them or if they're playing and you're somewhere else in the room. Now, the second round of people I would recommend these speakers to wholeheartedly is content creators. If you're someone who's making YouTube videos, if you're making indie games, if you're doing anything where there's like sound mixing involved, except maybe music production, these speakers, as far as I'm concerned, are a no-brainer. First of all, because their size, they're small, they don't take up much space. But secondly, because of that articulation and that detail. I just don't think I've heard any other speakers in its price bracket that have that level of detail and information, which when you're doing sound mixing and you're doing production, that stuff's essential. It's super important. So I think if you're someone who's been using speakers from a brand like, say, Logitech for years and years, and you're ready to upgrade, this is the next step. No brainer as far as I'm concerned. They do make those old desktop speakers that I've spent the better part of a decade messing around with sound clear as mud. And that sounds like hyperbole, but that's honestly how I feel. I've been genuinely shocked by the quality of the sound coming out of these for production work. And I think they might actually be more accurate than my component-based system that I built myself, which is kind of frustrating. The last group of people I'd recommend these to is just someone who's looking, they've got a small bedroom, they want to be able to play some music. Maybe they've recently bought a small turntable, either a Bluetooth one or one with an internal phono stage, and they're just looking for a nice, classy, clean set of speakers that aren't going to take up too much room. They can sit with their unit in the corner and just enjoy music in the background while they're doing stuff. They're just a really pleasant sounding listen. And it's a very different experience, obviously, sitting in front of them at a desktop than it is to having them in the corner of a room playing music. Again, aesthetics are important, and I think these would look really nice in a small office or, you know, like a guest bedroom or something like that. They just got that real look to it. I could see them being popular in Airbnbs as well. Those sort of situations, I think, these speakers are absolutely perfect. Again, it comes down to that simplicity. You got your Bluetooth, you got your auxiliary, and in those sort of like casual situations, well, that's really all you need, isn't it? Well, that's been my experience of the Ruark MR1 MKIIs, at least. Have you had any experience with these speakers yourselves? Let me know about them in the comments below. Now, if you would like more information on these speakers, or indeed anything that we have here at Living Entertainment North Coast, you can always reach out to us, and we encourage it. So please leave a comment in the comment section down below. You can email us at info@lenc.com.au, or you can give us a phone call. Doesn't matter, just make sure you reach out. So thank you again for watching, and bye for now.